Apple is testing 9 new Macs, a new MacBook Air, a new baseline MacBook Pro, as well as new 14 and 16-inch models, an M2 iMac, a new Mac Pro, as well as a plethora of Mac Minis, an M1 Pro, an M2, and an M2 Pro version. So here's everything new so far, as well as some interesting patents on triple screen MacBooks and some more wacky ideas that Apple is currently testing. But first, this video is sponsored by Synology and their new RT6600AX router, one of the world's most powerful Wi-Fi routers. Check it out by using the link below. And now, back to the video. I want to start off with the MacBook Air, as this is what I think the majority of you care about the most. And some of you might already know that its biggest change is that redesign. One that introduces a flat body, similar to the new MacBook Pros, and one that could potentially add a notch, as well as a variety of colors. I think that this new MacBook Air would be the perfect choice for students, teenagers, and people who just want Apple's most affordable MacBook. The battery life is expected to be at least 18 hours, and performance-wise, we're getting Apple's new M2 chip, which would boost the GPU performance by about 25% thanks to 2 extra GPU cores. But in my opinion, the biggest upgrade would be dual monitor support. Speaking of upgrades, we've launched our Shorts channel, ZONEofTECH Shorts, where I'm showing you tips and tricks on how to massively boost your MacBook's brightness or some useful iPhone tips. Check it out and let us know what you think. Then we have the new baseline MacBook Pro that I've covered in some of our previous videos. Now this one is said to come with a new M2 chip, but given its active cooling, it should perform better. We've seen reports on this having the same design as the 14-inch, just without the 120Hz mini LED display, as well as reports of the design remaining unchanged. Now I do think that having the same design as the 14-inch would make more sense, as in that case, Apple's entire lineup would have a more consistent design. Next up we have the redesigned Mac Mini. The general idea is that this would resemble the new Air and the new iMacs with a variety of colors, glass on top, as well as a very generous selection of ports. Performance-wise, this is said to be getting the M2 chip, of course with active cooling, so we should see a similar level of performance to the base MacBook Pro, but for a lower price. The current M1 Mac Mini is one of Apple's best-selling Macs. Like, you could get one of these for as low as $500 if you shop refurbished on Amazon, link in the description by the way. So I do see this new model potentially being even more popular thanks to those colors. Then according to Mark Gurman, Apple is also testing an M1 Pro Mac Mini. This would allow users to get a significantly faster GPU as well as 2 extra CPU cores, and it would be the middle ground for users who don't need the M1 Mac Studio, but they do need something more powerful than the M2 Mac Mini without breaking the bank. Now, I should mention that all of these 9 Macs are set to support Wi-Fi 6, and given that all modern smartphones, consoles, and devices today also support Wi-Fi 6, you need to get yourself a Wi-Fi 6 router to take full advantage of your devices. I briefly mentioned their RT6600X router at the start of this video, but now I want to give you 3 reasons why you should consider it. 1, it is one of the fastest routers available today, with 5.9 GHz band support on 3 different radios and 6 different antennas, as well as a total bandwidth of 6.6 gigabits per second. 2, it features a 2.5 gig Ethernet port, which allows you to connect it to a NAS and get some seriously impressive speeds. And 3, it features an advanced operating system unlike anything I've seen on any router before. It's pretty much desktop level with the ability to create users, assign devices to them, and then enforce parental controls, web filtering, and speed limits. This router even has its own free built-in VPN. It is honestly the most impressive Wi-Fi router that I've ever seen. Check it out by using the link below. And now, back to the video. The 5th new Mac is said to be an updated 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, this is an interesting one because for a while now we've heard rumors that Apple was not going to update the 14 and 16-inch models in 2022. Instead, they would only be doing that in 2023. But this might not be the case, as according to Mark Gurman, Apple is already testing the new M2 Pro and M2 Max chips. Mark hasn't specifically given us any specs for the M2 Pro, but he did say that the M2 Max would come with a 12-core CPU and a 38-core GPU, up from the current 10-core and 32-core. That means that the M2 Pro should come with a 12-core CPU and a 19-core GPU, which means that CPU-wise, they should both offer a 20% jump from the M1 equivalent, while GPU-wise, they would offer an 18.75% jump over the M1 Pro and M1 Max. Then we have the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, which will keep the same design and update the specs with the M2 Pro and M2 Max chips, of course, with slightly better performance than the 14-inch model, thanks to better thermals. And number 7, according to Mark Gurman, Apple is also testing an M2 Pro version of this new Mac Mini. I don't believe that they would have both an M1 Pro and an M2 Pro version, in which case I think that it would only keep the M2 Pro. We also have a small update to the 24-inch iMac with that M2 chip. So same design, same everything, just slightly more GPU performance. And at number 9, we have the new Mac Pro. As we all know, this will come with a major redesign, specifically made with Apple Silicon in mind. And it is set to feature a chip that is even more powerful than the M1 Ultra inside the Mac Studio. The M2 Extreme, I guess? The current leaks are pointing towards a 40-core CPU and a 128-core GPU, or exactly double that of the M1 Ultra. I am looking forward to seeing what this new Mac Pro can do, although the target audience for it is incredibly small. So when do we expect to see these new Macs? Well, we could see the M2 chip announced at WWDC, with all the M2 Macs being launched then too, followed by the M2 Pro, M2 Max, and M2 Extreme chips later in the year. But I just don't think that Apple will have enough time at WWDC for an M2 unveil. So I think that a more realistic launch would be in October or November for all the Mac updates. Now, we know that Macs are getting more powerful with updated chips, and in the case of the MacBook Air, the Mac Mini, and the Mac Pro, we are also getting brand new designs. But what about after 2022? Is there anything exciting coming? Well, there are a couple of things. For example, we know that Apple plans on updating the displays on the MacBooks to OLED panels. However, this won't happen until after Apple has updated the iPads to OLED. 2025 is actually when Ming Chi Kuo expects this to happen. And I personally don't have an issue with the current MacBook's display. Yes, you do get a bit of blooming when you're watching a movie in complete darkness, but to be honest, it's not that bad. Like, of course, OLED would be better, but you need to keep in mind that OLED would also impact the maximum brightness that these displays can reach. We also have a couple of recent patents that show us what Apple's been experimenting with. This one right here shows us what is essentially a cooling stand for a MacBook made by Apple. However, this is a bit smarter than your usual cooling stand, as not only does it attach magnetically to the bottom of your MacBook, but it will also communicate with the MacBook directly in order to adjust its fan speed based on your MacBook's temperature. They also have a patent showing a speaker system mounted underneath the keyboard and thus eliminating the need for a speaker grill. I never thought that speaker grills were an issue, but it seems that Apple does. I've also noticed a couple of patents relating to a MacBook iPad hybrid, one made entirely out of glass, and then another one that has a detachable screen, which could also be a Pro mode for the iPad. Video about that specific patent right here. They also have a patent for a highly modular MacBook where its base can be configured in multiple ways. Like, you could have a full-size keyboard, or replace that with another display, or have a smaller display and then also a smaller keyboard. I do like this idea myself, but I also think that unless everything is integrated into the device, I don't think that people would want to carry multiple modules for this MacBook. However, out of all of these, my favorite one has to be this one: the ability for your MacBook to wirelessly charge your other Apple devices. This patent also describes how data could be transmitted this way too, such as system updates, authentication data, pretty much anything. The only thing that this patent does not mention is if the palm rest area would be made out of glass, since the current aluminum chassis would inhibit any wireless signal to pass through. From all of these patents, we can tell that Apple is definitely experimenting with some very wacky ideas, most of which will never see the light of day, but some, like the ability to wirelessly charge your other devices, might. And this is what really excites me about the future of the Mac, the idea of us getting something totally new. But let me know in the comments what excites you the most about the future of the Mac, and definitely subscribe for our 25 iPhone tips video, which is coming out later in the week. I'm Daniel, this is ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.